All right, good morning, boys and girls. Today we're starting a new module, Module 6, and we're going to work on Lesson 1. So you'll notice that I forgot my notebook today, so I'm going to just write it on just a plain piece of paper and then tape it or staple it into my notebook. So if you don't have your notebook, you can always do it on paper and then staple or tape it into the notebook. All right, so we're moving into Module 6, and Module 6 focuses on decimals. We just finished Module 5, and that focused on fractions. Well, fractions and decimals are related. So fractions and decimals both show a part of a whole. All right, so both decimals and fractions show a part of a whole. So for example, we know that if we have a fraction, for example, like 1/5, this is not a whole. It's one part out of a total of 5 parts in your whole. So if this is your tape diagram, you'd have 5 parts, 1, 2, 5, and one of them would be shaded. The way decimals work, however, is because decimals use place value, we're going to be working with tenths, hundredths, those kinds of denominators. So just as a reminder, when we're working with place value, like our place value chart, so far we've gone all the way up to the hundred, thousands, and millions. But I'm just going to kind of draw like ones, tens, and hundreds right here. So we know ones, tens, and hundreds. We worked a lot with those place values. These are all whole numbers, not parts of a whole. These are wholes. However, if I had a part of a whole and I wanted to write it using place values, I'd use decimals. So let me just kind of add to my place value chart. So just like on a number line, if this is 0 and this is the number 1 whole, I can put there's all kinds of numbers in between 0 and 1. They're not a whole number, it's a part of a whole. So I can show it with a fraction, or I can show it instead with a decimal. I have a couple different ways I can name that part. So there's just different ways to name the part. All right, so here's my place value. So once I'm smaller, like if my amount is smaller than 1 whole, I can move into my decimal places. So a decimal looks like just a little dot at the bottom, like right at the bottom of a number. So this is tenths with a TH. So notice there's really no once. We don't have a place value that's smaller than 1 that we would label once. It actually is tenths. So just to the right of ones is tenths. And if we remember, when we move from like the hundreds to the tenths, we're dividing by 10. When we move from the tens to the ones, we're dividing by 10. So this is kind of why we don't have a ones place, it's a tenths, because when we move from the ones to the tens, we're again dividing by 10. So we have tenths. So let's say instead of a fifth, I actually have I'll make it 2 tenths, 2 tenths. Let's say I have a fraction 2 tenths. I can break my number line into 10 pieces, and I can also write 2 tenths as a decimal, because here's that. This is tenths. We can say this as tenths. So I can write, if I have 2 tenths, I could put my 2 right here. So I don't have any ones, I have 2 tenths. So I can write it as a decimal, or I can write it as a fraction. They're the same amount. I've written 2 different ways. So I'm going to go ahead and break my number line into tenths. All right, so I have 10 parts of my number line. And if I had 2 tenths, 1 tenth, 2 tenths, it goes right here, 2 tenths. So if I had 2 tenths, decimal version, fraction version, here it is on a number line. I originally gave you the example of 1/5, that this is not a whole number, it's a part. Well, if we remember about equivalent fractions, I can take this tape diagram and split it into more pieces, and I can create 2 tenths using this tape diagram. So if I split it horizontally, I now have 2 pieces out of 10 because that's an equivalent fraction. So a fifth is the same as 2 tenths. 2 tenths on the number line, 2 tenths written as a fraction because it's equivalent, 2 tenths written as a decimal. All right, so we're going to do one more example. Let's say I have, let's say I have 5/10. So I have 5/10. Well, again, I can write this in a place value chart as a decimal because this ends with the word tenths, and that is a place value on my place value chart. Yes, there. So notice it's THS at the end. All right, so on my place value chart, I'll quickly just draw one here. So I'll say this is my ones. I'm going to have my decimal point, my tenths, because they're smaller than ones. Tenths. All right, and if I have 5/10, I have no ones, but I do have 5/10, 0.5. So that's a decimal point. 0.5 is the same as 5/10. It's two different ways to write. So this is my fraction or my decimal. I can write it in two different ways, fraction or decimal. So we'll continue working and taking notes about our place value chart and relating the place value charts to fractions and how we can create, how we can turn a fraction into a decimal or a decimal into a fraction because they're just parts of a whole. So remember, fractions and decimals show a part of a whole. They both can show the same quantity. All right, so now we're going to actually open up Module 6, Lesson 1. So remember Module 6, so I'm making sure that my book, it actually says Module 6 and 7. This is the one we want. We're going to turn it and open to the very first lesson. That's on page 3. So I'll write page 3 here. This is page 3. So make sure you are on Module 6. It will look exactly like this. So we're going to go ahead and do the first couple of problems together, and then tomorrow we'll continue the lesson and do some more of the problems and look back at our notes. So it says, shade the first 7 units of the tape diagram. Count by tenths to label the number line using a fraction and a decimal for each point. So let's take a look at the tape diagram for a second. So this is showing one whole, and it's broken into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pieces. So that makes it easy to write it as both a decimal and a fraction because it's already broken into tenths, and tenths is a place value on your place value chart. I'm going to shade 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right below it, they drew a number line. So remember, I told you when we started drawing number lines that you can always draw a tape diagram, and then you can use the beginning part of your tape diagram as 0. The ending part is your whole number, in this case is 1. And we're going to label each of these points on the number line as both a decimal and a fraction. So they did the first one for us. So this is 1/10. 1/10, 0.1, 1 over 10. So this one would be 2. 0.2 is 2/10. So 2 over 10. Notice your denominator is going to be 10 because it's broken into 10 pieces, and tenths has a denominator of 10. This is 3, 0.3 or 3/10. And we keep going, 0.4, this is 4/10. 1, 2, 3, 4/10, 4/10. 0.5, 5/10. 0.6, this is 6, 6/10. So this is the decimal version because that's your tenths place. This is your denominator 10. 0.7, 7/10. Okay, now I'm done because we're only shading up to 7/10. I'm not going to label these, but obviously this is 8/10, 9/10, 10/10 as a whole. All right, so now let's do one more example for the next number. So it says write the total amount of water in fraction and decimal form. So we are doing both. We're relating how fractions and decimals are parts of a whole. You can write them as either a fraction or a decimal, as long as you have it as tenths. Shade the last bottle to show the correct amount. All right, so we have this whole bottle would be 1 whole liter, but they're saying we have 5/10 because this is your tenths place value. Okay, so that's called tenths. And we're going to write it as a fraction. Well, tenths means our denominator is 10. So 5/10. And then we're going to write it one more time as a decimal. So you have practice writing both as a fraction and a decimal. They wrote it for you here, so you're basically just rewriting it here. 5/10, 5/10. All right, so again, oh wait, hold on, I'm sorry. I did not look at this correctly. This is actually 5/10. Sorry, it's shaded up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 6. Sorry, they stopped at 6/10. this is actually, this part of the bottle that's full is 6/10. So we're gonna actually write 0.6. They're showing you that this is actually 5/10. Sorry, let me go ahead and kind of just mark where this 5/10 is. All right, let's do a couple more. So this is 5/10, but they're showing you the bottle's filled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8/10. 8/10 of the bottle is filled, so 0.8. So make sure you correct this one because I made a mistake on it. Make sure you correct that one. We'll do the last one. They're telling you here how much to fill the bottle up to. They're saying it's 9/10 of the bottle is full. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm going to shade my bottle up to here. So I'm going to shade it lightly with my pencil. There's the water. So it's almost a full liter, but it's 9/10. It's 1/10 short. So I'm going to write it. They wrote it already as a decimal for you. We're going to write it as a fraction. Denominator tenths, right? We see tenths. We have 9 of them, 9/10. All right, so tomorrow we'll continue the lesson on this page 3. Make sure you have all your notes, and I will see you either later today or tomorrow. Have a great day.